So my name is Liana Orlandi. I'm the program grants manager at AIM. And as part of my work, I'm organizing webinars this year because we have grant funding from the Farmers Market Promotion Program through the USDA to help provide training for our market participants. And I did some surveying this year, and other people have shared opinions. And one of the topics that came up was this desire to learn more about how to sell wholesale. So I'm happy to welcome you to our part one of a two-part series with Heather Frambach, Sell Smarter, Not Harder, Improving Your Wholesale Strategy. Heather has a lot of experience in different aspects of the food system, and she will share all of her expertise with us this morning. You will have an opportunity to ask questions, and then hopefully a lot of you will participate in part two as well on October 20th. So if questions arise after the fact, feel free to reach out to me. My email will be at the end of this presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks, Heather, for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Lana. And thanks for the introduction. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you guys about this topic. It's really important, I think, to think about how to support farmers more strategically in this really intense marketplace and really intense world. So it's a topic that's near and dear to me, and yeah, really excited to get started. Let me see. Okay, so, sorry, I'm having a couple. Okay. So what's on the docket for today? First, I'm going to go over a little bit about me and my background. I promise not to go about myself too much. And then we're going to go into why are we discussing this topic and a couple definitions that I think are going to tee up the discussion that we'll go into a bit later. I'm going to define value chain coordination. It's a pretty popular buzzword right now, and I just want to dig in a little bit for what it means for the topic today about wholesale sales specifically and the range of tools at our disposal to help small food producers increase their sales. Then we're going to go into some little mini case studies. I think that giving specific examples is the best way I know to kind of really dig into what we're talking about here, and show, not tell. So that, because I could blab at you all day about my theories about things, but hopefully we'll be able to tease out some insights from there. Then I'll summarize some of those insights, and we'll go into some very specific tips and tricks for what you can use when you're selling someone and how to talk to the person across the table from you. And then we'll go into what's next in both the short term and the long term for this topic. Okay, a little bit about me. As Liana mentioned, I've been a little bit all over the place in the food system. On the nonprofit side, I've been a farmers market manager both in Sacramento, helped launch the Oak Park Farmers Market there. And then I was also a community manager at Hope Farmers Market in Austin, Texas. About 8 or 9 years ago, I worked for CAF, mostly on farm to school, so helping K through 12 schools, doing technical assistance, helping them enhance their regional and local procurement, and also managing the California branch of Food Corps there. Then I worked for Real Food Challenge as an organizer, and then I'm currently on their board and working mostly on farm to institution, so helping universities shift their procurement to more local, sustainable, ethical, and humane sources. And then helped out a little bit with supply chain and operations for Charlie Cart, which is another nonprofit that supports nutrition education for K through 12 schools. On the government side, I worked briefly on the legislative side in an assembly member's office during the Schwarzenegger administration, saw how the sausage was made a bit, and then worked for the City of Austin Sustainable Urban Ag Program as the interim director of that program, helping update the city's urban farm code in a pretty interesting political environment, which is a whole other topic that I could go into another time. Most recently, I'm coming from about 5 or 6 years on the buy side. At Blue Apron, I joined there right when it was starting to get big, and eventually became the senior national category manager for dairy and dry goods. So I managed all of the long-term contracts and relationships for both artisanal, local, regional suppliers, as well as national and international suppliers. And then even more recently, I was the director of sourcing at Imperfect Foods. So I launched their grocery division, their private label, their product development program, and I managed all categories on the grocery side, including dry goods, dairy, protein, beverages, anything that's not a vegetable, basically. And then other food system stuff, I've just done some gigging around from time to time, from doing delivery driving, small grocery retail, working as an assistant manager at a rural grocery store, and then I've done a couple stints as a food service kitchen prep in a couple of kitchens. So it's been really fun, just kind of through my career, being able to see lots of different corners of the food system. In my current roles, my main gig right now is with Kitchen Table Advisors. If you're not familiar with them, what they do is they mostly support small farmers from Sonoma, Napa, Marin, all the way out to Yola, Solano, and down to the Salinas Valley, with improving their on-farm business practices, so getting them up to speed in terms of if they need to get up on QuickBooks, if they need land, if they need credit, if they need resources, things like that. And what my role is they've basically thought about how to take the next step and get farmers more linked to markets and selling opportunities. And so that's kind of where I come in, and I'm helping them develop a strategy there, and we'll go into that a little bit later. And then also on the side, I'm the co-founder and principal of Supply Change LLC. We do lots of different services like business advising for small food startups, menuing, costing, strategic planning for anyone who's trying to develop more regional and local menus. And then I also do contract sourcing for institutions like universities and hospitals. All right, enough about me. Let's go into why we're talking about this today. As many of you all are very well aware, regional resilient food systems are basically the cornerstone of our environmental future, our social future, a just future. And there's a lot of people working on this topic, but it seems to be a moving target. It can be really confusing to figure out what the best way is to link small and mid-sized food producers to markets, even though it's, again, the cornerstone of our future. A big part of this is just because there's been so much consolidation on both the production side and on the retail and manufacturing side, with big ag, big retail taking huge control of these supply chains, and which has resulted in a really big lopsided balance of power away from small farmers and food producers, and that can make things really difficult to make things right. A big part of that as well is that with that market share and that power, a lot of times, even when buyers say they want to do well and source well, they tend to get in their own way, right? They set up systems and processes and checkpoints, long approval processes that make it really difficult for them to do what they say they want to do. So that is another barrier. A lot of times we see champions being celebrated in the media, food service champions that are willing to bust through the red tape and the bureaucracy to source from good farms and good food producers, and that is really great. But we don't want necessarily a system that just depends on these champions. So what we're going to talk about today is what can farmers actually do for themselves and small food producers as well to increase their sales in a high pressure, really intense competitive marketplace where the odds are a little bit stacked in the wrong direction. So that's what we're going to be covering. So to tee us up, let's go over some quick definitions. Wholesale for this presentation, we're going to talk about how it means the sale of specialty crops, meat, dry goods, or value-added foods, which includes beverages, desserts, things like that, to restaurants, distributors, grocery stores or their distribution centers, e-commerce companies, food manufacturers, and box-based community projects, which we're seeing a lot of those pop up lately with COVID. So these tips are going to work best for those who are selling or who aim to sell half a pallet to a truckload of product at a time. And then I touched on this briefly before, but value chain coordination is a really popular buzzword these days. It means sometimes different things to different people. The way we mean it today is it means using a creative set of tools to link buyers to suppliers. So we know it takes oftentimes a lot more than just getting buyers and suppliers in the same room or in the same Zoom room these days, or doing a cold call introduction to get a deal or relationship moving. So value chain coordination is the strategic, focus things that we can do, and there's a whole range of activities along this where we actually make deals and relationships happen. Next. Okay. So a little bit more detail on that one is that with Kitchen Table Advisors, we're working on a framework to think about value chain coordination, kind of integrating the power dynamics that I mentioned a bit earlier. So thinking about how we can move the needle for small food producers in a way that actually shifts change. So if we think about it in terms of a spectrum, on one end, there's really like the more tactical there, which we're calling coach and support, which is sort of saying like, okay, here's the system that we're in. I need to move some product in the short term. I need some support now on like crafting the right pitch, etc. So that would be like more coach and support. It's a little bit more accepting the status quo and working within it. And then as you move down that spectrum, there's innovate, which is more asking the buyer to meet you somewhere in the middle and let's collaborate and come up with some innovative, like let's do R&D together, or let's do some experiments. So you pay me to grow something or make something for you, product development wise, etc. And then as we move down the chain one more to organize, this is more of like the deeper political systemic change, like farmers and food producers banding together, working at the policy level, just sort of a deeper systems change type perspective. So activities along this entire spectrum are really important to make changes in our unjust food system. But today we're going to focus a little bit more on the tactical, the coach and support, which again is important, but not the full picture. So just wanted to put that in perspective. And the KTA program that I'll be leading for next year, we're going to have, again, a full range of activities along the spectrum. All right, let's dig into some of these mini case studies to illustrate the point. So just a quick disclaimer that these are, in order to present these more clearly, some of the stories have been simplified a little bit and one or two have been anonymized a little bit, but this is more just like to show you conceptually where and how things go wrong and right in terms of trying to sell wholesale. So let's look at case study number one, which is a grass-fed beef producer, Mariposa Ranch. So this just happened this past year. Mariposa had an excess of several cuts of grass-fed beef, and they wanted to form a relationship with Guggenheimer, the food service management company that manages a lot of the food service activities at Google's San Francisco campus. So they reached out to a Guggenheimer VP with a long email asking for a direct selling relationship and explaining, what their mission is, or their environmental stewardship, et cetera. And they had a KTA rep also send a long email of support attached to that. So Guggenheimer, the VP, ended up turning him down, but he was pretty vague about the reasons why, and he didn't follow up when pressed for more information. So let's review quickly just, what went wrong with this one. One, the emails may have been a bit too long, and they were focused a lot on the supplier's mission rather than what the buyer's short and long-term needs might have been. So this is what I call inbox vortex, and I'm sure many of us have experienced this when trying to get in touch with a buyer. I've been guilty of it myself as a buyer. But these long emails are, where even if the buyer was reading that and saying like, hey, this person obviously seems really great, they're kind of like, okay, what's in it for me? I'll get to this later. And then it goes into the vortex. There's also some major missed opportunities in this one because Mariposa, because they couldn't get a conversation going, didn't quite understand the constraints that the Guggenheimer team has at Google SF. So basically that campus is super locked down security-wise, and they could only take a certain number of vendors and dock trips to that campus. So they really are restricted to putting everything through just a handful of distributors. And Mariposa actually works with distributors. So it was disappointing that they didn't even get to that point in the conversation, and that Mariposa pitched so strongly on the direct side that both sides missed that there was an opportunity to attack it from another angle. There was also a missed opportunity to focus on super particular programs that Guggenheimer has at Google. For instance, they run the campus's Conscious Cafe, which is 100% local and sustainably sourced. It's a much smaller program, but it would have been a much better place for Mariposa to focus their energy because that is super chef driven. So if they would have gotten it in with the chef said, hey, I love this product. Guggenheimer, please set up the relationship for me. That would have been a much more successful route to take. All right, let's go to another grass-fed beef example. Richard's Grassfed, which is in the same San Mateo Coast area as Mariposa. So similar situation. Richards had a ton of excess product in its freezer, and they wanted to form a relationship with UC Davis Med Center because they found out that there was a lot of interest there on the buying side for local, sustainable, and ethical sources. So they used a mutual contact to introduce him to Chef Santana Diaz and requested a phone call. So Chef saw the value in getting some high quality excess meat at a discount, and he worked with his staff and with Richards on a unique slotting program. So what went right here? Helpful introduction, short email, immediately got to the phone. Richards was able to message about the discounts, the value to the buyer based on the excess inventory situation. And then this unique slotting program that they worked on, basically the way it works is both sides share like a Google sheet where Richards is able to put in what they're long on in their freezer. And then the chef is able to work with the staff and say like, okay, I see this coming in, let's build in with a 6-week lead time, they're able to develop a menu based on those things. So a little bit of collaboration there that helps both sides get a big win on that one. All right, let's go to case study 3. This is a produce distributor, veritable vegetable, that a lot of us are familiar with. And this is like a really representative situation for veritable based on my conversations with their buyers. So earlier this summer, a farmer reached out to VV offering what he felt like was a competitive price range for the kale season. He's growing on about 8 acres, so he's a small organic kale farmer. The kale buyer at Veritable turned him down, saying, you know, our pipeline of kale growers is super full right now, don't have room for you. The missed opportunity here being that the farmer was also growing Romanesco, which VV was actually super searching for. But the farmer didn't offer it up because he was only growing on half an acre. He thought his pricing was too high and the volume was too low, so no sale happened. So what went wrong here? The farmer assumed that his most high volume crop would be the most desirable, but that pipeline was already saturated. And VV also missed the opportunity because they didn't know that he was growing the Romanesco, that they were looking for other products, and that for those high demand, low supply products, super specialty stuff, they actually offer crop planning support. So there was a missed opportunity on both sides to connect on where they would have overlapped. All right, let's move to a dry goods example. This one is another recent one that was brought to me by CAF, and I know that Josefina's on the call. So Next Gen Foods is a rice grower and marketer and aggregator based in Sacramento. So they have lost a lot of their food service accounts during COVID, which makes sense. And they had a moderately sized list of SKUs with excess inventory on them, ranging from 1 pallet's worth to 12 truckloads worth, depending on the product. So they contacted a buyer at Imperfect Foods, you know, my old stomping grounds, sent a long email with their full list of SKUs, just by product name, not by volume or other detail, and then requested a phone meeting. The buyer kind of talked to them for a bit and then flaked, and nothing happened. So, oops, I forgot to update the rest of the slide, but we can go over what went wrong. It's basically the long email again, which we covered in another slide, sending too much information at once for the buyer to digest. So sending like a long list of products without the specific information that the buyer would need in this case, which would be volume, rough pricing and quantity. Like overwhelming a buyer with too much information is a surefire way to get flaked on. And yeah, so those were the main misses there. And then the second phase of this is that this one actually has a good resolution. So after the first failed attempt to connect with Imperfect, NextGen actually reached out to CAF for support with its excess inventory. And since I'm in frequent communication with CAF, they reached out to me asking for insight on selling to Imperfect Foods and helping NextGen with their second round of their pitch. I had them simplify their SKU list based on what I know about Imperfect and what they're looking for. So to Imperfect, I had them send them just their 2 highest volume SKUs, the things that they had the most inventory of, with the information I knew Imperfect would want, which would be the exact volume, what their co-packing situation was, and their target price. And then I had them prepare another list of several low volume SKUs for another customer that's a little bit more in the works, but would be more appropriate match for them volume wise. So sales are in progress at both accounts now. So what went right here? Much simplified messaging, way less on the narrative about who the supplier is and what they are. I kept that part short, targeted, detailed information that's easy for the buyer to digest about the customer's exact product and program needs. And then including key information on specific services. So for Imperfect, like having the ability to co-pack something and take Imperfect specifications on things is everything. And then also, of course, having some inside information from me on how Imperfect thinks about margin to set the right price was helpful as well. All right, so there's plenty of other examples we could go to, and I'm actually really thrilled to see that there's some small, like I see almond milk and pies and things like that. Those are products that I'm really excited about and I would love to go more into, but maybe we can move on to just what should good small food producers do tactically, knowing that, so, you know, there's so much confusion about like how to present. Each case seems to be different. What are some general rules of thumb that we can use when we're talking about increasing wholesale success? So in general, at KTA, one of the things that we're working on is developing almost like a framework for analyzing buyers. So instead of just taking them as they are, thinking about how do we analyze the person in front of us, this partner who says that they want to do well and source right. How do we scan them to see how ready and willing they are to work, so we can understand if and how much energy we want to spend on this buyer? So that's going to help us both with if we are matching a buyer to a supplier to ensure that we're not wasting anybody's time. And then also, how can we train farmers and food producers on how to have these conversations more effectively? So, because we don't want small food producers to waste their time either. Your time is precious. So the ways that we're thinking about it is along these certain sort of related dimensions. So the first one is just you want to assess the buyer across from you. What's their general food system knowledge? You know, some of these guys like seem to speak the words of sustainability, but when you are talking with them, it becomes clear that they may not actually know that much about the food system. And on a related note, just, you know, sometimes you'll hear someone name drop some of like the major farms or regional food producers in the area. And then you know that you're talking to someone who at least has a handle on what's going on in the region. If you don't get that sense from them, that's already a really big barrier that it's going to be a much more difficult and uphill conversation, even if they seem super interested. So assessing for their general knowledge of the area, the region, other food producers, what kind of consumer are they, etc. The next thing you want to assess for is, do they have defined sustainability goals and targets related to sourcing? So there's all these big sourcing commitments out there these days. There's Good Food Purchasing Program, there's Real Food Challenge, there's Healthcare Without Harm. And then a lot of companies and institutions also use their own internal metrics for sourcing sustainably, ethically, locally, and they all have different definitions. So you kind of want to assess if something like that is going on, how serious is it, like how much of a corporate mandate is it, or is it just kind of lip service? These are the kinds of things that can be really helpful to probe at if you can find the right way to have that conversation. You know, like, hey, do you have a local sourcing goal? Things like that. Then you can get some more information on some leverage that you might have in the conversation. Because, you know, for someone, local might be within 50 miles, for someone else, it might be 250 miles. And so then you can think about your competition radius a bit. If it's a 50-mile local sourcing radius, then you're in good shape if you're pretty close to this buyer. If it's 250 miles, then you have to think, okay, maybe I'm competing with some larger food manufacturers or farmers in this area. These next two are really interesting to me. So ability to change or create new supply chains and ability to flex rules and make things happen. Sometimes when you're talking to a buyer, you start getting this like sense like, it seems like they want to do well, but they don't seem to have much power in the situation. You know, they're locked into like this distributor and this contract, and they can't do anything about it. And it seems like they really just don't have much flexibility at all. Like, okay, I really want to sell my almond milk to this person, but they're locked into UNFI, and there's brokers all over these people, and I don't have an in with this broker, so I'm not sure if I can really get in. But if the person that you're talking to seems to have a lot more flexibility and is not locked into contracts, seems to have a lot more autonomy over the process, you can kind of get a sense for how often they're adding and subtracting suppliers and things like that. And then even on the corporate side, this ability to flex rules and make things happen. I see this a lot in corporate food service, actually. So like, for instance, Artisan Sodexo, which runs, you know, some specialty food service accounts, sort of like at bougie hospitals and universities and things like that. In order to get approved as a vendor there, it can sometimes take over a year to go through corporate headquarters. However, each local site is empowered to make its own smaller purchases. So anything that's under $10,000, the staff can buy with a credit card. So if you can get in with a staff member at one of these local Artisan Sodexo sites, they're actually allowed to buy from you if it's less than $10,000 on their credit card. So that's a way that staff has found ways to flex rules and make things happen. Another example would be, again, going back to Guggenheimer and Google, one of the VPs there found that chefs really want, local stuff, but again, having to go through the corporate approval process was taking forever. So they developed a strategy called what they call service level agreements, so that they're able to set up these really quick and dirty little things so that they can bring something on within 3 weeks, especially if it's a hot item, and especially if a Googler tastes it at a farmer's market or something like that and really wants it, then the staff will be really motivated to bring it on. So that's another thing you can gauge for, like, hey, are there workarounds that you have? Are you able to use them in order to get stuff done? Or does everything have to go through big corporate? Then I'll just run through these next ones fairly quickly. Has budget to source locally? Obviously, this is like the big stop sign that we all hear about. Sorry, I can't afford you, etc. And if whenever you start hearing stuff like that, it's time to move on, because you're just really not going to get anywhere. If someone says, I might have some breathing room, then you can start talking about easing in and starting to increase the relationship and increase sales over time. And then, sort of related to that is the ability to form trust with this person. I've been mentioning, Guggenheimer and Google a lot, but this is one where they're not so good. They're very transparent that sometimes they just drop people at will. So if stability and trust is really important to you, that's a different type of buyer, where maybe the sales aren't super high, but you know that they're going to maybe like develop a new product with you over time, or stick with you, or try to find ways to get you more involved. The relationship is going to deepen over time. Just something it's hard to assess for, but you can kind of get a feel for it as you go along. And then just pro small supplier mandate, pro BIPOC mandate. We're hearing this all the time. Everyone is saying, I really want to source from Black, Indigenous, and Latino farmers. Like, where do I find them? How do I do it? It's like, okay, some of these people are starting from square one and bless their heart a little bit. But what you want to assess for is not that they're just looking to add and stir, but that they actually have some awareness of the injustices in our food system, and how committed they are to that. And they're not just following some corporate script, but they're actually digging in and doing the work to understand what that all entails. Okay, so we're almost at the end here. Just following up on that slide, as we're scanning for all these dimensions that we want to think about with the person across from us, some good questions to ask that I suggest to people all the time, and these are just some examples, not meant to be an exhaustive list at all. But if you're deep in a conversation with a buyer and you're not quite sure how to set the price, or you're getting stuck on a pricing conversation, sometimes to open it up, it helps to just ask, hey, what's your target margin? This has been a game changer for me in terms of getting things moving as a buyer. If I just tell someone, hey, I really need a 25% margin on this, so you can work backwards from there, and this is the price that I want to sell it at to my customer, so you can see if that works for you. So just kind of getting a transparency conversation going can really help to see if you want to spend more time in this. Otherwise, if you're both talking about incomplete pricing information, it's a good place to get stuck. Again, related to what I said before, how often do you add suppliers? How flexible are you? Then you can kind of get a sense for what time works best for them. Like maybe you're trying to come on board at a time when they're doing some big inventory project or some supplier evaluation project. You want to get a sense for when is the best time to strike, and you can just be upfront and say, I would like to know the best time to have this conversation because I want to, both of our time is valuable. You can also find out, again, if they have a long approval process or if things get set up really quickly. And if they do have a long approval process, sometimes it's still worth it. And you just want to ask up front, hey, what's involved? Does your finance team have to approve it? Does your regulatory team have to approve it? What certifications do I need? Just get all the information up front so that you can make an informed decision about whether that's going to work for you. Again, in the spirit of transparency, sometimes it can help to open things up and say, for instance, let's think about, a beverage like at Imperfect, I was buying from a small artisanal regional beverage company. And they asked, hey, who else supplies artisanal beverages for you? What distributors do you work with? Maybe we can sort of get a piggyback deal going. So if you model transparency and say hey, I'm not afraid to talk about who else you're buying from, and I'm not afraid to talk to you about who else I'm selling to, a lot of times that opens things up. And I hear that a lot from produce distributors as well. For instance, I was just talking to Coke Farms, and they said that that's really important to them. If farmers are telling them that they're selling, X amount of products to a competitor, and they want to sell the rest of it to them, that helps them model and math, and then everybody can meet at a better price. And then again, just in some of our case studies, we covered that sometimes there's a big miss in terms of asking, what exactly are you looking for? Sometimes just when we're selling, we're thinking about, okay, here's what I have. I hope they like it. I'm ready to defend it. I'm ready to advocate for it. But sometimes just asking them what's at the top of your list, that can open up opportunities too that are sometimes completely unseen. So just a good rule of thumb, just scan for that towards the beginning. Okay, that's the first part of all the content today. I feel super winded from talking so much, but I'll just go over briefly what's next before we go into Q&A. So next steps, as Liana mentioned, the part 2 of this webinar is on Tuesday, the 20th. We'll go more into this topic, and we'll dig into some more detailed case studies, and possibly from you, and Liana we'll talk more about that in a bit. And then long-term, as I've been mentioning, KTA is building a new market access program based on value chain coordination activities, including pitch support, buyer introductions, pilot partnerships. This is mostly targeted towards farmers, but if you're a small food producer, I can still help you with my own business. So please, you can email me at heather@kitchentableadvisors.org if any of that sounds interesting to you, and we can certainly keep you posted as programming comes up. Okay, I think we're ready for Q&A. Leon, is there anything else that you wanted to add before we dig into this part?
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute here. I don't have anything to add. I think it's great. People probably do have some questions. So if you have a question, you should be able to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. There aren't too many participants. So I think go ahead if you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Heather. I appreciate the presentation and the information. My name is Bakri Olatunji with Rural Foods and Pies. And one thing I noticed that we've been working at is trying to get together a business plan. And how would a business plan fit into the scheme of things as you present them in terms of, phases?
Yeah. So
that's something you would develop later, or would you present that early on in the process?
I would say a business plan is, in my experience, meant to be mostly internal. So if it's something that you're thinking about using for a buyer, that's not something I would recommend. I think what I would message to a buyer in that case would be like, based on our business plan, we're planning on ramping up production to X. So I would only share the capacity building aspect of that. Where do you hope to go, the growth that you're projecting, things like that, and also the new products that you're looking at developing. And also, if you're able to reflect past sales, if they look good, or if you can, jazz them up a little bit, then that is really helpful for a prospective buyer to see as well.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Alicia from Bever Almond Milk.
Hey, Alicia.
Hi, I have some questions for you. So right now, we primarily sell at farmers markets and at grocery stores, and we'd like to grow our grocery store sales.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the primary way that we do that is I make cold calls to grocery store buyers or send a cold email. And, that can be hard. They're busy. They have, their daily work that they're trying to get done. And I hear you say several times that it's important to keep the information really short in that introductory email or phone call. Can you just say a few things that might be the right things for me to say to get their attention if I do get them on the phone?
Totally. Well, it would be helpful for me to know, like, what I would advise you on is like any particular differentiating aspect of your product, and again, keep it brief as you're picking up on. So basically, like maybe 1 or 2 nice attributes about your product, where it's made, nutrition, whatever, extra flavoring, sourcing, etc. And then a message about maybe a pricing range that you could go to, and a suggested so if you happen to know what their margin is on beverages for grocery retail, it tends to be about 20 to 25. You can say, put in the MSRP for them, and if that pricing works for you. And then if you've sold it anywhere else, or you can say, hey, this is done really well at this farmer's market, and we're excited to grow. For instance, if you having a ton of success at an AIM farmer's market, You can say like, we sold, 10x this year than we did last year, something like that, just to show that there's growth and interest in the local community.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, Heather. This is Maureen Wagner, and I work with Differentiation.
I'm sorry, Maureen, I couldn't hear you. Where do you work with?
My laptop. I work with Bakri at Uhuru Foods and Pies.
Oh, great.
Can you hear me better?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I tend to start these with my laptop closed, but you can't. It doesn't work. So really appreciate your presentation and the answers to the questions and the questions themselves from Bakri and Alicia. Anyway, a couple things. One is the thing about the long introduction.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about somebody talking a lot about their mission, and I think that we have made that error in reaching out to some locations. The thing is, I do believe our mission is actually one of the differentiators. So Uhuru Foods and Pies is actually a Black business. But it's a collectively owned Black business, not individual. It's not just an individual Black business, it's organizationally owned with the mission to create economic development in Black communities. It supports community programs. No individual is making money off of it. So it is different. And so how do we, and people are gonna wanna buy the product to support that mission. So how do we succinctly present that as a selling point?
Yeah, I agree. That is your number one top selling point, and an amazing differentiator in this time. So what you definitely want to put that front and center, but what you don't want to do is go on for a really long paragraph or multiple paragraphs. I think if you can practice telling your story in, one paragraph, just a couple sentences, and just be really concise and compelling, then I think that is going to be much better. But I think honestly, because so many people are looking for Black-owned business products, you're gonna have a little bit more leeway to expand on your mission more than like some other undifferentiated product. So I think you actually have a little bit like more space to talk about, but you should still focus on being as concise and compelling as possible.
Hi, Heather. This is Alicia again.
Hey.
I was wondering, can you tell us a little bit about your business and what services you offer?
Yeah, sure. So for the purposes of this, I am starting to offer a little bit more matchmaking services. I've been doing it pro bono for the most part over the past while, just to support mostly like small farms, small food producers, etc. There is what I'm trying to do is build that more into my KTA work so that it can be grant and funder funded, and I can continue offering that service for free. In the meantime, like this, working with Leanna on this next, basically a portion of the webinar is going to be the next sort of iteration of that, where we'll be able to do like almost live pitch work for part 2. So I think we can talk more about that in a bit, but yeah, there's a couple other services I offer that are mostly about matchmaking, but charging institutions and hospitals for those that want to meet their sustainability goals or their ethical sourcing goals. I charge a fee to them, and then I do matchmaking to link that. So my goal is basically to like not charge farmers and small food producers if I can avoid it, and try to put the cost on people who should actually be paying for that work, and trying to keep it pro bono for small food producers as much as possible. So this is one of the avenues that we're exploring that.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
So in part 2 of the seminar, are you saying that we will have an opportunity to go more into detail about our businesses and our goals, and kind of run some role playing about, how to talk to buyers?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So what Leanna and I discussed is basically having people submit their case study to the email address that Leanna provides. And then we'll evaluate and do maybe 1 or 2 pitches live and work through them together so that we can get you prepared to meet a near-term goal that you have. So that was the general concept behind part 2, exactly.
Thanks. That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Hi, Heather. This is Sadi from Marin Gourmet. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can study.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the presentation. Heather, as a small producer locally in Marin County, we'd like to work with you. And from just as a general point of view, I think manufacturers and local producers don't mind paying for your services when it pays off.
Yeah.
So I would not worry as much about charging us, especially when you're sure that you can get 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 something to go through for us, because we're happy to share the wealth with people who bring those events to us. It's in the past where we've been let down by hopes and dreams that now some of us are more cautious, but someone like yourself who has this experience and who's putting a good foot forward and willing to offer their time for free, we're happy to share the wealth in as it comes in.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Saudi. Maybe I could have more of like a accident injury attorney model where I don't get paid unless you get paid. But yeah, I appreciate the feedback on that.
I have a question, Heather.
Yeah. Hey, Josefina.
Hi. So from my experience, sometimes it's a hit or miss, but what would you recommend when a buyer doesn't write a farmer back and that farmer is really interested? Maybe like they provide no feedback, but maybe the price was too high or they didn't share enough information. What is like an appropriate way to follow up without sounding desperate, even though you are?
Yeah, I know, right? This is the hardest part, I think, because when a buyer ghosts you, it's, you know, it's hurtful, and it shows that they're just either they didn't read it, or like sometimes it's innocuous as that they just didn't get to it and forgot to circle back. So I think in my experience, a good rule of thumb is email a second time, and then if you don't hear back even then it's time to try another angle. I always appreciated as a buyer a second email. Because there were just many initial pitches that I just missed. And so always do a second email and try to make it shorter. And then if that doesn't work, then you need to find another angle of attack, right? So finding someone else to introduce you, finding an event that they're going to be at, some other thing in your network to help you get there. Because if they don't respond to the second email, then they've given you an answer on the approach that you've presented to them. So it can be really frustrating though.
Yeah, and so thanks, that's helpful. And when you write the initial email, I mean, I know you're going to get to it in the second session, but when you write your initial email, what should you be including? Should you be including like your availability as a producer? I'm speaking on behalf of small farms, by the way, for everyone in the session. So for a small farmer, should they be including a couple of crops that they have? Or should they be including a full list? And or what if like a farmer has some product lined up and they know that they're a pretty organized farmer and they know that they're going to be harvesting corn in 3 weeks? Should they send their availability as soon as they know that the date for harvesting is approaching? Or should they send it like the week of? What do you think?
I think that it depends on who the distributor is, right? Like if we're talking about like a Coke or A&A, then, you know, like then we want Ernesto to know, because since he's doing the crop planning monthly, that that corn's going to be coming in, because everyone's going to have corn coming in at once, right? So I want to say this. If it's someone that needs translation support, then you want to get on the radar as soon as possible, and you want to know already what the distributor is looking for. So if you know that they're looking for corn and you know that they have a window, then only send corn, right? But if you know that they're open for a lot of stuff, and if you're in constant communication with who the distributor is, and you know that they're looking for a range of stuff, then go ahead and put the whole availability list, the volume, and then the time range where it's going to be harvested. In my experience, that's usually the best approach to making sure you get an answer. If you don't get an answer to that, then you know you're dealing with someone who needs more phone more phone calls or needs it presented in a different way. And then when you next get on the phone, the first question should be, how do you want this information presented? Because when you send an email, if it's anything that's beyond a cold call for someone you've already done business with, you should already know how they want information presented. That's I think the best way to like deepen the relationship. If I get an email as a buyer where someone is sending me only the key information that I want, that makes me love that seller and I want more and more of it. So just learning more about like what works best for them. And if they're giving you confusing signals, then there's only so much you can do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Heather. This is Eric Schledowitz.
Hey, Eric.
Hi. Hey, so I've had a question, obviously is what I'm doing here. I'm Eric Schledowitz of Schledowitz Family Farms, a third generation California farmer. My grandparents immigrated to this country in 1932 after the Bolshevik Revolution and all that stuff. Anyway, we grow 4 seasons of fruit on our farm, and in recent years we've had just a lot of volume, and we've struggled to sell it through the farmers market, and we're always seem to be missing the mark when it comes to how much to pick, and there is a lot of waste that we are experiencing. And in some crops we have high volume and we're struggling to find customers. And in particular in this month, it's we're picking a lot of grapes, and we also have a lot of grapefruit, and is what we ran into a barrier here this last week. I was informed about the 2,000 boxes a week that the Vacaville School District is passing out in their food service plan. And we were asked to be a part of that. And one of the things that they asked for was the Global Gap certification, which we had never needed to have because we fell under the minimums of the requirement.
Yeah.
And, I haven't been able to negotiate that hurdle in a timely fashion. And so it's just been left alone. I mean, and this is, as recent as last week.
Yeah, this is what I was alluding to when I said that buyers get in their own way. Especially since you mentioned you're under the threshold for gross income, it sounds like for Global Gap, it's unreasonable for people to place these like additional barrier when it's clear sometimes that they don't quite understand the barrier that they're placing. But
yet they're asking for unique and different food, which is exactly what we offer.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's very frustrating. But I think this is actually a good follow-up for me and Josefina to talk about with Ben at CAF about the Vacaville program, because I wonder if we can get through to them on how much of a barrier this is because it seems like this is preventing the introduction of food that they're exactly trying to target, which is frustrating. What do you think, Josefina?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so Eric, we'll take that up because we were actually just discussing this Vacaville project yesterday, and we can circle back with you. But yeah, there's a couple of other interesting programs that are coming up, Eric, that would be interesting to match you with, where I think you could move some volume. So let's circle up after this, and I have 2 ideas for you.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Hi, Heather. This brings up a question for me at Bear Almond Milk. We sometimes get merchants who are asking us for an organic certification, which we don't carry ourselves for such a small business, but our product is made with ingredients that are certified organic. So all of our suppliers are local to us, the ingredients are certified organic. Can you suggest some ways that I can communicate that with the buyers, encourage them to work around that?
Yeah, I think you can message made with organic ingredients, so that I think that's something that I've seen work successfully in the past, and that I've worked with producers on when I've bought specialty beverages before, made with organic ingredients. So even the co-packer and your co-packing process isn't certified organic, I think that it conveys enough benefit to the end customer. So that's a tack that I would use. And I would be curious to see, like, in the stores that you're targeting, it would be, what I would do is also take a look at the shelf and the cold case already and see, you know, how much space is given. Is it all 100% organic specialty beverages in there? Do they have a mix of conventional and organic? Are there any that are more like you, sort of in between, that are made with organic ingredients? What's their placement like? And then you can see how they're prioritizing their product selection. If it seems like it's really all organic all the time and there's very little of the other stuff, then it's going to be a much more uphill battle, but it'll help you kind of like strategize a little bit for how hard you want to push.
Okay, thank you.
Heather, there was a question that came through the chat when you were speaking earlier, and you had mentioned Artisan Sodexo as a potential place, and there was a question on how to spell that name.
How to sell to Artisan Sodexo. So they have,
or how to, yeah, and how you spell the actual name, and yeah, how you sell would be great. I think people would like to know.
Yeah, let me put that in the chat. So they have a number. Let me put it here real quick. Artisan Sodexo. So if you Google them, you can see they have, I think it's like 60 or 70 sites. A lot of them are in California, and they tend to be, again, like food service types accounts at like corporate campuses, universities, hospitals, things like that. And this is like, of all the food service management companies, you know, you got like the big boys like regular Sodexo, Aramark, Compass Group, and all their subsidiaries. The two most friendly to like farmers and small food producers, I would say, would be Artisan Sodexo and Bon Appetit. And of course, no one's perfect, and these food service management companies still have, you know, giant corporate headquarters and make boneheaded decisions all the time. But in terms of approachability and flexibility, those are going to be your best bets. Though I want to caution that you do have to have some pretty good volume in order to be able to sell to those. So you need to be moving, like, you know, at least 2 to 3 pallets of product at a time, I would say, in order to make it worth their time for some of these larger kitchens. It could be possible that there's a couple smaller accounts that I'm not as familiar with that could take a smaller volume of product. And then I know that they also have, like, some of these campuses have micro kitchens where you could sell something like a specialty pie, things like that. So there's stuff to explore, and I encourage you to take a look into that, and I can look into it a bit more as well on my end. Okay. I don't know why it went back so far.
Okay, so this is like kind of like a crazy question, but what is a small farmer? Like, I work predominantly with Latinx farmers in the Central Coast, Heather. What if they wanted to sell to Google?
You can do it, but it's got to be the right program. So, like, I know that, like, for instance, like the Google LA campus, they're doing employee boxes right now. And I'm not sure exactly what their sourcing looks like, but I could hook you up with my friend who runs that program. Mm-hmm. And they are sourcing from Fresno, they're sourcing from Salinas. And I'm not, it seems to be like a fairly small program, so it seems like it would be flexible to be able to take small volumes. And then for Google San Francisco, the Conscious Cafe is the best bet, because everything else through Google SF and Mountain View goes through Vesta, the distributor, which used to be SF Specialty. And Vesta is like not super into onboarding small farmers. Like, they'll fight against it unless their client really pushes for it. So Google LA is honestly the best bet for going direct. And then the next best bet is if you have like something super compelling, super specialty, and you got like 4 farmers going in on something really cool, then pitch it to Guggenheimer, who will tell Vesta to do it for you, would be the process.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're awesome, Heather.
Thanks.
So Heather, for people who want to participate in the next webinar on October 20th, do you have a Google form that we'll be sending out for them to fill out, or just some particular questions?
I'll send out, I'll work with you on a Google form, and we can send it out to all the participants today. In the next couple of days, we can get that done. And then and then we can let people know when they've been selected, and I can get more information if necessary.
Great. And I will also send out a link to this webinar when it's ready. We'll have it up on our AIM's YouTube channel. And I'll also be sending out a survey that hopefully all of you who participated will take just a couple minutes to give us some feedback for our next webinar. Great. Are there any other questions at this time before we wrap up?
Hi, this is Maureen again from Uhuru Foods and Pies. Heather, we had a couple, we're really novices at the wholesale because this really started out again from a Black working class community, you know, funding type of thing. Anyway, we had a couple situations, and I'm wondering if they're ones for the next meeting, but one was with Imperfect and one was with a large grocery store chain. So is this the kind of thing that you want to see in the scenarios for next week?
Totally. Yeah, that's, yeah. If you want to break, we can do it a couple ways. We can do like, here's a pitch that I want to prepare, or let's do a post-mortem on something that didn't work well, or someone that I want to circle back to, etc. And Imperfect would be a good one, since I used to supervise the buyer that you probably talked to. So that either way, I think we're pretty flexible on what type of situations we're open to.
Yeah, the actual situations, we never got to talk to the buyer. We talked to the sustainability person who is no longer with Imperfect.
Oh my God, I don't know why they say you there. You should definitely be talking.
Well, we had a relationship with that person and we met with them about a few different things. And they just came right back and said, no, not now. So we never even got to the buyer, so.
Interesting, okay. But yeah, I can help you out with that for sure.
Thanks.
Heather, do you have a phone number for work?
I have an email address, which I prefer.
Okay,
but, yeah.
can you send it to us, I guess, because I can't write it down right now, but if that can be sent, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah, we can send it out.
Great. Well, Heather, this was a lot of information packed into an hour, and I really enjoyed the case studies and seeing you break those down for us. It's I learned a lot today because this is new to me in my role with AIM. And so I'm sure people will be processing this information, and I think it'll be helpful to revisit the webinar and like look through it again as we all move forward. So thank you for this resource and for sharing your knowledge today. It was really, really great. So I'm looking forward to October 20th. I hope everyone who's on the call today can join us for the follow-up.
Yeah, so, look forward to helping out more and keeping the discussion going. This is really fun.
Great. Okay, and my email is here, and expect an email from me with more information and Heather's contact information coming. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you so much, Heather, for your time today.
Of course.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you.